is really pretty easy. You just have to do your homework. None of these situations are necessary. It doesn't need to exist at all. Yes, there are things that you can do. You're required to leave your money behind. I've been involved in silver and gold since the 70s. Currencies tend to fail, especially fiat currencies, which is most of them. Everyone returns to precious metals after a collapse. Something's really wrong here.
Welcome to Inside the Vault Knowledge Hub. Join us as we answer all your burning questions, from precious metals to second passports and IRA investments. Each episode, we tackle a new topic and bring you insights straight from the experts. Let's dive in and unlock the knowledge together.
Welcome everybody to the Knowledge Hub. I'm Mark Yaxley, sitting in for Jeremy Varlow, who's enjoying a beautiful vacation right now. Here with me today is a longtime friend, a mentor of mine, and writer, Steve Hawley. He's written under a pen name for many years, and we have the pleasure of sitting with Steve today to hear all of his thoughts about everything happening in the world and how it pertains to gold and silver as well. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
It's great to have you with us. You and I know each other very well outside of SWP. You've been a mentor of mine since the early days of this company, so it's a pleasure to sit with you and hear your thoughts. We often get that chance amongst ourselves, but today you can share some of your thoughts with our viewers. You've been writing about some of the things that are happening right now for a number of years. You know, the macro shifts in the geopolitical scene, increasing debt, a shift towards gold and silver, how it's become more important again for investors. And so I want to focus today on what are the events and the effects of the things you've been writing about for a while that are happening right now.
Okay, well, I'd have to back up a little bit and say that there are essentially economic long cycles in the world that run about 80 to 100 years. And at the end of each one, there's a collapse. It's intended to work that way. The idea is that you build up an economic system where everyone gets thoroughly involved in it, thoroughly invested in it, and you get them into the areas that you wish them to be in, primarily stocks, bonds, banking, and so on. And then you pull the rug out from under them. And whoever is really running the show gets to sweep most of the money off the table. So the objective is to get people as convinced as possible to have all of their money into forms, all of their wealth into forms that can actually be taken from them rather easily. And that's why we had the crash of 1929. That was the last most recent one. And of course, most people lost everything because it was all in stocks and bonds and in banks. So you collapse the banks and you crash the markets. And so we'll be seeing that again now. I've been writing on this topic for about 20 years or so in a variety of publications, always under a pen name. So it does appear in Zero Hedge and Lou Rockwell and International Man, all of those publications, pretty regularly, pretty much every week. But I value privacy very highly, especially as a Cayman Islander. We place a very high value on that. And so I value my privacy, hence the nom de plume. But what I've essentially been writing about is the symptoms, what the symptoms of this are likely to be, and hopefully what the timing of it is likely to be. The timing is the hard part. In actual fact, coming up with the symptoms and understanding the collapse, the economic collapse, is really pretty easy. You just have to do your homework. You just have to work hard at it. But understanding the timing is extremely difficult, and nobody can get it exactly right. And everyone that I know worldwide who does the same thing as me, who I keep in touch with, say the same thing. We're all asking about the timing.
So you alluded to doing your homework, and I think that's what we want to get at today for the viewers. We want you to do the homework for them, or you've done the homework, so now it's time to share the lesson. So what should people be looking for that's happening now? What indicators are you seeing that say, you know what, I've been right, this is approaching, things are happening, this cycle is kicking in? What should people be looking for?
Well, let's see. We're part of the first world, and first world globalism is a very real thing that's been going on for a very long time. It's very much under wraps. They stay under the radar as much as possible. People who are at the head of it, you never get to see them. You never hear their names. You see the cardboard cutouts that they put up in prime ministers and presidents and so on. These guys are actually rather low-level actors. They're disposable. It doesn't matter whether it's the president of the U.S., who is theoretically the most important guy in the world. He's not. He's temporary, and he will be dumped when he's no longer necessary. In the meantime, he does the bidding of those who paid for him to be there. And it's the same in the UK or other countries. But what we'll be seeing in terms of activity is, first you see tremendous turmoil in the country, and it's by design. You want to see in all of the first world countries as much turmoil as possible, political turmoil, social turmoil, economic turmoil, and also in the media, a constant battle going on between right and left, each one trying to beat down the other one. But it's all a play. It's all scripted. And both sides, each one plays its part, but it's all part of the same play. The writers of this play don't discriminate between left and right. These are their actors. And the idea is to create as much confusion and fear as possible so that people comply as much as possible, so that when you shut down the system, you take as much away from them as possible. And they don't blame you. They blame each other. Each side blames the other side, not recognizing that it's the people upstairs that did the work. So all the turmoil that you see were ICE situations in the U.S. that people are very upset about. It's all by design. It's to get you people used to the idea that martial law is normal and should be, and they're there to protect you. But none of these situations are necessary. It doesn't need to exist at all. So the next question is, if this is happening, and I can't very well do much about it, and it's happening all around me, do I have any choices that'll allow me to sidestep it so that I don't become a casualty? And yes, there are things that you can do, which I've done with my life. And first of all, you should ideally be questioning where it is you live and what your surroundings are and how your surroundings are going to do in a situation like this. Are they going to thrive? If you're in the middle of a city, chances are sudden poverty is going to act very badly for you, and you're going to be endangered. So you want to be as far from a city as possible. You'd also like to be in a warm climate, hopefully, where food grows all year round, because there will be food shortages. There will be famine in each of the first world countries. So you'll want to be in a place that you can survive year round. And you'll want to be in a community where people are like-minded and defend each other and protect each other and act like a community. If you don't have those things around you, it's a pretty good idea to find yourself a bolt hole somewhere if you can afford it, and either have a small apartment somewhere or an entire other home in a country where those situations do exist. And I have homes in several countries that fall along those lines, and all of them are outside of the primary first world countries. But the other thing is your wealth. If you want to take your wealth with you and not leave it behind, most people in the first world will be recognizing that that the first world countries, notably Europe and the U.S., are increasing capital controls, making it harder and harder for you to move your money out. It's not so hard to move yourself out, but you're required to leave your money behind. There are penalties to be paid, exit taxes and all of that, crippling exit taxes. And if you get one word wrong, you're liable for prison time. So many people will choose, if I'm going to get myself out, I'll simply have to leave most of this behind. So what can you do to avoid that? And for me, I've been involved in silver and gold for, since the 70s. I invested back then and bought and sold for years. And there was only in 1987 when I got intelligent and realized I need to stop selling and continue buying. So for the rest of my life, I've just continued buying, slowly piling the stuff up. Precious metals are unique. Whenever there's a crisis, internationally, worldwide, currencies tend to fail, especially fiat currencies, which is most of them. They'll collapse. And everybody's surprised. This was the most valuable thing in their life, and now it's gone. And for the last 5,000 years, everyone returns to precious metals after a collapse for a period of time, and then they move back into the same old mistakes. But precious metals protect you because they are not issued by any government. They're elements that come out of the ground. You can't print them. You can't increase the number without doing the work and the processing. And so if you add to your wealth through gold and silver and other precious metals, but particularly those, because they're the most predictable, you have a better chance of surviving a crisis than you would otherwise.
So we're seeing a lot of people buy gold and silver right now. There's been a fleeing into gold and silver. We're also seeing a lot of people change their home addresses lately, moving to countries like the Cayman Islands or desiring to move to countries like the Cayman Islands. There's a limited amount of space here, obviously. There's a few other strategic options you can consider. So is it fair to say that even the general population, do you get the sense that the general population, or at least a percentage of that population, is picking up on the things that you're saying today?
Yes and no. I've been watching this and waiting for people to pick up on this for a long time. It does tend to be true that the average guy just doesn't really want to have to address these things. He wants to stick with his normal life, watches ball game on TV and that kind of stuff. I think that in Europe and North America, people that I'm seeing there, for the first time in the last year or so, a lot of those people said, "Oh no, this is all nonsense. This is a fairy tale. Everything's going to be fine. It'll be all right." And for the first time, those same people are saying, "Something's really wrong here. It's really wrong, fundamentally wrong," and it's a new experience for them. So they don't know how to address it, and they can't go and sit at the country club or go to the local bar or wherever they go and talk to somebody about it because everybody's kind of stuck in the same situation. This is all new. Of course, it's happened countless times in history, but for people of this particular lifetime, the people who were alive the last time it happened are all in the cemetery now. So there really are very, very few people that you can talk to about it, and they've got to attempt to figure out this abstract on their own. So what I'm seeing essentially is that the average American or European feels in his gut that something's badly wrong, but intellectually he hasn't been able to figure out exactly what it is because of the confusion around him, and very few come up with a solution. Whenever there's one of these situations, it's less than 5% at best who come away okay. It's very, very rare for people to be able to crawl their way out of it, figure it out, and protect themselves.
Well, that's why I think it's very important to have guests like you on the podcast and sharing this knowledge, because like you said, there's a lack of understanding of what's happening. There's also a lack of knowledge sharing. I mean, there are some great writers out there like yourself who write on a regular basis and make a point. I know it's become like a life mission of yours at this point to share as much knowledge as you can, and you've been very clear about that with me and with SWP for a number of years. So I'd like to thank you, Steve, for taking this time, your valuable time, to share your knowledge once again with our viewers. And I believe there's a very good lesson or lessons in there. So Steve, if people want to follow you more closely going forward, follow your work, how can they do that?
Well, let's see. I think it would be better to not follow me specifically, but to follow those people who over the decades I've learned to respect in this vein, people who are very knowledgeable. Just one voice isn't enough to give you an education.